Basically, want to be able to sit at a table and have 4 players tell me my soap operas.
Ash, thank you for sitting down with us. Can you just tell everyone a little bit about who you are?
Yep. I'm Ash Griffiths. I am by profession a programmer, but I've been writing indie role-playing games and an advocate for narrative gaming in the UK since the early 2000s. I was involved in the setting up of the London Indie Meets, and I started publishing just little bits of house rule stuff, and then I published my first actual game in 2011, which is What You Wish For, and I've just carried on ever since, trying to promote alternative to the traditional way of people role-playing, so that they understand that this narrative approach to telling stories is just as feasible of creating the excitement that they're used to without having to restrict themselves to somebody else's opinion of the story as it goes on. So.
Your games are very different from the traditional tabletop role-playing games with the character sheets and dice. What inspired you to go more that way?
The beginnings of the indie route, when the Forge forums, which I don't know if people know about, but there was an early set of indie RPG forums where lots of discussion about game design came from. Usually it was a very narrativist heavy crowd, and it caused some controversy. The less said about that, the better. But when that came around, lots of people were playing with lots of different ways of trying to make their games simpler. Then what happened is somehow we discovered the concept of Nordic LARP. And so the Nordic LARPs, yes, which had always been their own little unique community of things, strongly influenced the American style of structured freeforms that came out. When those were starting to be talked about, I saw some of the early ones, and a couple of my other friends who also do some of the game design, we started, we could do something like this, and we started heavily based originally off Matthias Holcher's Archipelago system, and then as we played more, we then helped Frederick Jensen with the playtesting of Montego 1244.
Oh, wow.
From that, we developed our ideas around how we were going to drive the plot through questions that characters are trying to answer, which led to Kev and Rich writing Witch the Road to Lindisfarne, and I did Family Affair, and then those all just led on to trying to get people to focus entirely on their character so that they don't have to worry about where the plot came.
How do you manage to drive players through this storyline? What do you feel, what are your views on that?
I've gone through quite a few different ideas. Early on it was trying to rely too heavily on the player's own input, which led to a lot of blank page syndrome, as we called it, which is you're staring at something like, I have no ideas, I don't know what to do. And my first real attempt to solve that was the game that eventually became Family Affair. I jokingly called non-league footballers' wives. I was like, what if we had a story which was, Footballers' Wives, the TV show, but actually all of these wags were just, married to guys earning minimum wage and working day jobs. From that, I came up with the concept of, well, maybe what I can do is I can define the structure of the plot beforehand. Yes. Because actually, if all they're worried about is what plot can I introduce because I need my plot to be good, they're not thinking about the right things, which is the characterization and how the relationships between the characters come out, which is what's more important, I feel, in the stories than what the actual outcome of the plot is. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write the plot for you. I'm going to leave it as bare bones as I can so you can do with it as you wish, but you can then take those character ideas and they would be very loosely defined. Like they're designed in such a way that when somebody looks at them, they get an immediate idea of what that character is, but everybody gets a different idea of what that character is. And with a few questions to drive what it is you're trying to work out, I then let people play with the same plot, and people have played this, lots of people have played it. I've never really played the same game, and lots of people have played it many, many, many times over, and they've always had fun. So people would think that these very railroady, in the traditional sense, games produce the same over and over again, but it really doesn't. Everybody responds differently.
It really helps as a player to know, what are my options here, but at the same time not to be limited to those options.
It becomes a very fine balance between enough information so that players don't feel like they have to worry about plot, but as little as possible so they have as much freedom as they can in how they're going to take their characters and what they're going to do with them. It seems when people look at the copies of the games, they think, oh, that seems really simple. You've only written 4 character sheets. And it's like, those character sheets went through 300 different versions, just subtly tweaking questions, because just how they work and how they interact, and changing people's jobs, for example, gave people different feels about it and gave them different ideas, and so that's how they came from being football players and wags to what they are in the final version of Family Affair, which is the social workers and the school teacher.
You're giving the players some parameters within which they can shape the character itself.
Yeah, exactly. And it means that people can bring ideas of what they feel those kind of people are like. It really allows people to crystallize these characters into something, and effectively you just sit there and improv with each other for...
A little more specific about the writing. What kind of tools do you use when you start writing a game like this?
I just have a big pad of A4 paper and I just start scribbling down. I start off with concepts of the ideas. For example, currently the one I'm writing on is called To Dance a Jig on Triburn Tree. It started off with me reading something about Elizabeth Sawyer, who was hung for witchcraft in 1621, and then the process of the Newgate, the procession that condemned people would go from Newgate to Tyburn. It was quite highly ritualized in that, like the night before, there was the bellman who would ring the bells, and those all gave me ideas, like saying, well, these condemned people could be going through the parts of this procession, and as they do it, you have a scene where they share who they are and how they've got where they are, and it slowly becomes more available. And so I tend to solve that. I'll see something that interests me, and I'll research around those ideas, and then I'll start playing it, and then things will change. Like I said, again, I went from Footballers' Wives to Social Workers, and one of my first published game, What You Wish For, began initially after trying out playing Don't Rest Your Head and feeling it was a beautifully inspired idea of a game, but I didn't think the system achieved what it was supposed to do. I like this idea of giving up your own memories for things, and so I was like, oh, let's do that. But then that turned into What You Wish For, which is actually not that. It's about just reminiscing about what was good in your life, and even though you're in a horrible place now, how do you move forward with it? And then I took the giving up your memories thing and wrote a little short other game called Fade Away about fays trying to protect the nature by giving up parts of who they are as their identity to it. I start with something will speak to me. It's like saying, I find this an interesting idea to explore in stories, and I will just play them until I can make it tighter and tighter and I get the effect that I want at a table.
When you know that you've done enough research, enough writing, when do you think this is a finished product and I can just let people play?
Generally speaking, it's a case of there will suddenly be a play test. So most play tests, you'll have them and they'll be all right, and you'll get a little bit of feedback, and then a few will go, and then the feedback will get less, and then suddenly you'll have one, and the game just clicks. And I don't know how to explain it. It's you just suddenly, this is exactly what I want. It's like the thing in my head is now happening on this table. So maybe there's a few little things to polish, but this is roughly where I am, and then I just then go like sand off the edges type thing and just finalize it up before producing it.
What tips would you have for someone who's starting to write narrative games in any form?
Most important thing is to play lots of them. It's amazing how many different things are out there that a lot of people know about, also in all kinds of corners, and one great exercise that improved me was writing role-playing poems. Short 20-minute games designed for very small numbers of players. Usually they're quite ritualized, but the point is I can knock out a role-playing poem in an hour, half an hour, whatever.
Oh, wow.
And as long as you've got a group willing to just play with you about it, you can iterate on ideas very quickly, and you get a large amount of experience there of just what it feels like to be in that narrative environment. And then once that starts, it's then about, well, what are the stories that I like? What things excite me? From games I've played, where do I really go, oh, that's amazing? And then you go, okay, well, how can I create something that drives that kind of story? So in my case, I really like kitchen sink melodrama. And so I'm like, well, lots of role-playing doesn't do that, so it's like, I'm going to drive mine around doing this, because that's what I want to do and that's what I want to see. I basically want to be able to sit at a table and have 4 players tell me my soap operas so I don't have to watch the TV anymore.
How do you ever feel an idea is enough to start writing about it? Because sometimes you'll have a spark of an idea and it's not enough, but sometimes...
So the answer is I have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of random text notes that I look back at now and I don't even know what the idea was. It's like it starts off as
relatable,
and it's like at the time it must have meant something to me, but I don't know. And it's just sometimes things catch me, and then I'll spend a little bit more time on it, and some things take a long time. Dance Jig on Tyburn intrigued. This initially started as a random comment somebody said to me 10 years ago. Somebody mentioned something about Tyburn. I can't remember the exact context to it. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of thing. And that's when I started doing the research. I'll move on to something else. And every so often I'll be like, oh, it's still an idea that I want. And so I'll go back to it. It just becomes refined that way. If something is good enough that after my first attempt at scribbling it, I'm still thinking about it and I go back and add more to it, that's generally the thing I'm going to push with. Occasionally I will go back and actually what I see from it is a totally different thing than I was working on, but it gives me some ideas for something else to go forward with, which is what happened with What You Wish For and Fade Away, where I started from that basis. But
that is amazing. Do you ever just combine ideas that don't make the cut on their own?
Sometimes. I've been trying to publish like a small collection of short ideas I've had, little role-playing poems, things that either didn't quite work or I think could be good in the right situation, and I think the best way for me to learn is to push it out to people and say, here you go. This is a book of what it's like to playtest one of. Here's a few of my games, roughly fleshed out. Let me know what you think. I've been trying to write that for 5 years. It's called Restructured Play. I've got maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of the things in a place that I'm happy with. I'm hoping to get that out at some point.
Yes, sometimes the small ideas are less intimidating than the big ideas.
Yeah, exactly. It's very easy to just knock out lots of little things and not worry about failing. I guess, it comes from the same principles as software development, where it's like fail fast. It's like just keep doing it and see what happens. And it doesn't matter if you throw something away. It's you have a bit of fun with your friends. Don't be scared to playtest your ideas. Most people are really nice, honestly. And they will play your games and they will give you honest feedback as long as you properly ask for it. But you have to be willing to take that honest feedback. If you get upset about things, it's probably not the best way for you to approach it. But equally, you also have to be honest to yourself about what it is you want. So people may have a different idea of like saying, well, I don't like that, and I'm like, well, actually, but that's what I want from this game. So that's staying it is. But thank you for the feedback. I understand. It's important to have that clear idea of what you're trying to get. But also accepting feedback where you have got something wrong or you could improve something.
How do you kind of define what kind of structure you need for a game?
Yeah, I can take the standard story plot structure. It's like most things, it's like aim for a 3-act structure, or for some role-playing poems, now my brain's going to remember. There is a Japanese form of comics that I can't think of, where they're just 4-panel comics with non sequitur endings. That's how I think about when I start writing my little poems that then become the games. It's like, actually, here's some ideas, and what's the weird, different thing that suddenly happens at the end?
Is there any recent stuff that you've really loved in the role-playing space?
Yes, Jason's latest game, Desperation, his gothic role-playing, where you collaboratively tell stories of survival horror situations using a deck of cards where you all basically build a map and the characters, but you all driven from these cards, the events that go on, and you add your own little bits of narration. It's really easy for people who aren't used to it to do it. I've run it for a lot of very trad gamers. They've often gone away going, oh, this would be perfect for those sessions when somebody doesn't turn up. Because almost everything, like literally you could just read the cards and add nothing and you'd still get a good story. But every card also offers you the option to, and now add your own little bit as well. I think it's a really smart take on the idea I was going for with Family Affair of here is a very formatted structure of the plot, so you don't have to worry about the plot, just worry about the character's motivation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the con.
Yeah, thank you for playing my games. It's been a pleasure. So.
If we haven't traumatized you too much.
No, absolutely not.